Our reading today are from words by Carl Jung. The shadow aspect of human nature is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. For no one can become conscious of their shadow without considerable moral effort. To become conscious of it involves recognizing the dark aspects to the personality as present and real. This act is the essential condition for any kind of self-knowledge. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To confront a person with his shadow is to show him his own light. Once he has experienced a few times what it is like to stand judgingly between the opposites, he begins to understand what is meant by the self. Anyone who perceives his shadow and his light simultaneously sees himself from two sides and thus gets in the middle. The most intense conflicts, if overcome, leave behind a sense of security and calm that is not easily disturbed. Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens.
So last week I was talking to you about alchemy and that you are all alchemists. And I will continue to present to you my version of 21st century Unitarian Universalism. That's what it is. Weaving things together in a way that I think is original and then not original. It's just world knowledge, ancient wisdom. So I hope to introduce some new things to you this morning. Alchemy. Alchemy, the black soil magic, when you break the word down. Mixing together the elements of the earth. Alchemy was a rigorous discipline. It's roughly a couple thousand years old, maybe even older. Some say it goes back to ancient Egypt. And I mentioned that these alchemical experiences in later years, they were of course trying to turn lead into gold, but then they were trying to also create this elixir of immortality. And many alchemists drank themselves to death because they poisoned themselves. In the process, though, they discovered things that we perhaps take for granted today. Glass, paint, perfumes, distilled alcohol. Alchemy is a process of pleasure and pain. It predates chemistry and has had a major impact on modern science, modern psychology. Some of the important names in the alchemy world are Hermes Trismegistus, Paracelsus, father of modern chemistry, Pythagoras, Sir Isaac Newton, and others, including many Sufi scholars. Now, when you think of the fermentation process, that's an alchemical process. And you can apply that to a human being, that you are going through a spiritual transformational process. Many cycles of development that expand your understanding onward and outward forever. Alchemy is a physical process like cooking or masonry, and it's a human spiritual process. And the goal is to separate the materials and recombine them into something new, something stronger. There's 7 stages of alchemy. I'm not going into that today, but you can look it up. And it relates directly to you and where you might be in your spiritual development, or in a stage of where something might be, like the stages of grief. There's 7 stages of alchemy. But remember, when we grow in one area, we still have challenges in another area. So life is a dance of pleasure and pain. Now, many of us love a good glass of wine. Amen. I don't drink much anymore. But when I did, I never thought about what went into the process of making the dark red wine so delicious. It might be sweet or bitter or smoky or all of the above, but I didn't think about it. I just drank it. I noted the flavors, but I didn't think about the process. But there is a process that breaks things down, builds them back up, adds things, takes things away. And all the elements are involved in the process. You start with the grapes, that's the earth. Then there's some water, I'm sure, involved. Probably some fire or some heating involved. I don't know. I'm not a winemaker. But then there's, managing the airflow. That's the wind or the air. All the elements are involved. Then there's a waiting process. You have to kind of let it sit. And there's testing. You got to see if it's any good. And finally, there's a formula that works, and a product that's good can be reproduced. That's you. You are that process. And when you take an alchemical approach to living, you realize that you are the very elements of the earth that must be refined until you become delicious. But even the best wine, if it sits too long, it must be poured out. It gets sour, and a new process must be begun. As the great teacher said, new wine must be put into new wineskins. So the process begins again. That's pleasure and pain, a process. To avoid pain and only seek pleasure will inevitably lead to an imbalanced life, an incomplete life. And our harshest pain, our harshest pain prepare us for our magnificent pleasures. This is where the great Carl Gustav Jung comes into the picture. Now, Jung is interesting. He discovered alchemy in his mid-50s. He broke from Sigmund Freud's approach to the human psychology, began to see human development in a different light, using dream analysis and rituals, understanding of the archetypes. Jung realized that we may be seeking pleasure over pain, not just because, comfort feels better, but rather because of our displeasure or discomfort in facing our shadow or shadows. But Jung believed that in our filth, we are found. That's his quote. And he said this quote, "It's high time that we realize that it is pointless to praise the light and preach it if nobody can see it. It is more artful to teach people the art of seeing." And he say that we come into this world with open eyes, seeing. We come whole, full of play, imagination, fun, innocence. And then as we individuate, develop our ego, develop a sense of the self, experience pain and trauma, we begin a disintegration process. But why? He doesn't say fully. But he does say that life is a journey of reintegrating the different parts of us that need to heal. so we can get back to that sense of wholeness. And he says that healing comes by facing the darkness, by facing the green little monster, by facing the ouches and boo-boos and hurts. The reintegration process is our way of learning to love and accept ourselves fully, and to find a way to love and accept this beautiful and broken world that we came alive in. It's about finding our way back home through humility, courage, and childlike awareness. That's what the great mystic teacher said. I like using the King James Version. Verily I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as a little child, ye shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. I preached before that the kingdom is a feeling. It can be a place, but it's a mentality, a presence, a state of mind. And we cannot experience it if we are not aware of what's right in front of us, to accept and appreciate it. That leads us to the kingdom. And children, they have that innocence. They love to play and have fun and are creative. And for the most part, unafraid to learn. We love to watch them. We love their sweetness, their little laughs, those little fingers and toes. You get a glimpse of that eternal essence when you look at them. They can still see that they are connected to their wholeness, that place where we all come from. And even as we go about, doing our justice work and trying to create the perfect material conditions on this planet for every human being, we will still not experience the kingdom unless we deal with our shadows. We won't maintain any physical peace within, without, until internal spiritual peace is manifested. The kingdom will come outside when it manifests inside. And you will know, when you see glimpses of the kingdom, you know. And you also know when you look at our world that we're not there yet. Not when we allow 60% of places like Puerto Rico to be without water. The world would immediately respond to human tragedy and crisis if we were there in the physical. And no nation would try to be conquering another nation. We know that that's futile, because we would know our oneness and interconnection, that when I hurt other people, I essentially hurt myself. And that's what studying the alchemical process, studying nature, has taught me, that we are connected to everything. To face our shadow, we must face our fears. And when fear comes, we tend to ignore it as best as we can. We try to deflect it, project it onto somebody else, or just run away from it. And when we do this, we move further away from our core self, from our innocence. As we move further away from that pure sense of self, Jung would say our soul. He would say we cause repression. And we begin putting on more false masks to hide, or we self-medicate, or as I said, we project our pain onto others, causing a lot of harm. This is the nature of our world. And after the pandemic, I feel like a lot of people have put on masks that are now shattering. And people are panicking, don't know what to do. Jung says that ultimately this happens, an identity crisis ensues. Who am I? What is my purpose? Why am I here? But it can be a good thing. As I was writing this, I started thinking about the story of Malcolm X. When he went on his pilgrimage to Mecca and he transformed as a human being, he experienced his mask shattering. It's a hero's journey story of transformation of the human alchemical process. Malcolm X was feeling the heat. Having shared his truth, he felt abandoned. His religion called him a traitor for speaking up against his leaders' unethical behavior. And then even in the black community, he wasn't trusted. Some thought he provoked violent responses to oppression. And he'd said many hard truths to white people. They feared him too. His message was powerful, but it was a separatist, us versus them. That is, before he went to Mecca. But it wasn't just his trip to Mecca, his pilgrimage, it was his journey to Mecca, where he saw Muslims of many races, and he had conversations with them, and he ate with them, and he worshiped with them, and he saw God, humanity anew. And he came back and he began to preach a message of integration instead of separation. He had a glimpse of his wholeness, and it changed him. This was a different Malcolm. And to get there, he went through a lot of pain and depression in his decision to embrace wholeness instead of separation. When we deny oneness, when we create these illusions of separation, that creates more pain in our lives. When we put on a bunch of false masks and do not move toward being our authentic self, there will be a breakdown in our beliefs and our character. And when that separation happens, if we're smart, it is an opportune time for growth. Growth happens in the uncomfortable. And if you're on that spiritual path and trying to live a better life, you will see that all of life is about separating and recombining the many pieces until we reach wholeness. Now, Carl Jung said that we evolve in a process called circumambulation. I had to look that up. Circumambulation. It's walking in a circle. Like a religious ritual, like walking our labyrinth. Our lives are circular. We rotate like the earth and sun and galaxy. Round and round we go. But we elevate to new cycles as we grow. Nothing is stagnant. And I was sitting with this circumambulation, and I was thinking about it, and I saw an image of space. I am a sun. I am the center, my own center. This is me in my most integrated state. And then there are planets that rotate around me. You know, they're attracted to me, it's through gravity, and influence me. They're part of me. And the planets, I was like, well, that's kind of like my thoughts and feelings, my experiences, people I meet kind of, well, no, they're their own suns, but thoughts and experiences, which are different aspects of my ego, but not fully me. I am originally whole, a sun, one sun among trillions of suns in the universe. I move from integrated to disintegrated, pleasure and pain, as a rotational circumambulation. Does this make sense? Originally, I'm integrated. I am love. I am wholeness. But as I move away from my center and individuate into my ego self, all those labels that define me, I experience the opposites: hate, separation, disintegration, and pain. The goal is to continue to go back to my center, remember what I am, a sun, when I lose perspective on the meaning of life. And this is what ritual and religion is all about: lighting candles, the mandalas that we stare at to get perspective, walking a labyrinth, or like our High Holy Day service that's coming up. These things help us remember what we are. Now, if you don't get this, and you might not, that's okay. I think if you give it time, it might make more sense to you. Young said we have to see things anew with fresh eyes. I always like to think of the Visine, you know, when you get up in the morning, your eyes are sticky or dry or itchy, and you get the Visine out, and it hurts a little bit, but then eventually you're like, oh man, this feels good. To see things anew, to clear up the eyes. The darkness can lead to the light. And then you have to ask yourself, like, what is the next right thing that I can do? If I am in that dark place, afraid to face that monster, what is the next right thing I can do? And if you can just do that next right thing, that's all that's necessary in the moment. But Young said that ultimately, to live a peaceful existence, we have to develop a relationship with the opposites, a union of the opposites. He called this the prima materia, which is that formless substance regarded as the original material of the universe, that out of all things were formed. So you are that prima materia, the union of the opposites. Now I want to share one more thing with you this morning from ancient wisdom that comes to mind. I don't know if you know this, but many young people are into these tarot cards. It's actually a very old card game, but clearly the designers knew something about the alchemical process. I don't use tarot cards, but I look at the art and contemplate the meaning of the art and look it up and things like that, because symbolism really is a helpful way of understanding life. I've been looking at only the major arcana, which is the first 22 cards, but it starts from 0 to 21. And the world card piqued my interest. Why? Because, well, it's the 21st card, and that's my birthday, September 21st. So the world card has always piqued my interest. And a recent teacher of mine, Dr. Teresa Bullard, who mixes ancient wisdom and physics, she opened my mind to something that speaks to this union of the opposites that Jung describes. Now, each card in the tarot represents a positive and negative aspect of you. And Jung talked about the tarot as representation of the archetypes. And as you process through a complete cycle of all the pain and pleasure involved in each card, these are the lessons. You come to the end of the 21st card. That's the end of a whole complete cycle of experiences. And it's the world card. Now, what does this world card represent? Many things. But for us today, it symbolizes the balancing of the opposites. The human figure you see has female anatomy up top. That's clear. And that represents the divine, life-giving feminine energy. But the secret that is not disclosed is that this figure is male and female. They have male genitalia behind that snake-like stole around their body. The figure is hermaphrodite, male and female. And this is also what the name Yahweh translates to, female, male God. The symbolism is clear. You manifest your greatness when you embody balance, when you embody the balance of the energy of the opposites in your thoughts, words, and deeds. That is the kingdom of heaven that you cannot see unless you come as a child who embodies both energies until taught otherwise. You see, the ancients believed that this is the purpose of life, balance, to keep climbing until you achieve that full, authentic self that is balanced in mind, body, and spirit. It is your purpose of your life pilgrimage. And we don't come to this experience, as you know, until we face the the dirty stuff and not be afraid of what we'll find. Face those boogeymen and women. Face everything that is false and still come to that all-encompassing conclusion that I am made by love, for love. My friends, this is my prayer for you as we move into the fall and this new church year. As you look at those falling, dying leaves, let them speak to you again this morning about life. Let the elements speak to you because you are those elements. Nature is always speaking. And might it give us all grace as we explore our purpose for being. Thank you for your time this morning. Blessings to you. Blessings on your pilgrimage home. May it be so. Amen.